Bailey, and I'm here with NMBU's Writing Center. This is a part of our PhD webinar series, where our goal is to give you tools and tricks to make sure that your writing process goes as smoothly as possibly. Today, we're going to be talking about what I think is one of the most important parts of the writing process, which is time management and getting started. The first concept I want to talk to you on is that of independent accountability. So something we know is that when you are younger, perhaps a student in elementary school, middle grade school, secondary school, etc., a lot of your academic supports are coming from your teachers, your mentors, in some scenarios, your peers, right? At the upper level, this isn't happening so much. Instead, a lot of that power and responsibility is transferred directly to you. We developed this concept of independent accountability, meaning that now you are not only the student, but you are also the researcher. You are the writer. You are the mentor. You are the motivator. You are the coach. It's very important to see yourself as every part of this process. You fill all of the roles at this level. That's why the concept of independent accountability is so important. We're going to talk about what to do to make sure that you're being a good coach and a good boss to yourself. With that, do know that while you are independently accountable, you are not alone. The university here has some excellent resources for you. Your first resource should always be your academic advisor. This is because they can provide you with those specific subject level pieces of advice and help you with things like citation styles or research methods that are suggested, etc. However, if you have basic writing level questions or want more technical writing support, you are encouraged to visit our writing center, NMBU Skriva Centre. This is where we host PhD webinars like this one, but it's also where you can find one-on-one consultations with trained peer writing tutors who can take small parts of your text and help you to improve it, and who can help you better understand academic writing as a skill that you can improve both inside of those meetings and on your own time. It's a great resource. It's completely free. You can do meetings in person or digitally, and I really recommend you check them out on our website. You also should look towards our YouTube channel. We're uploading new videos this year. We should have lots of great things to talk about, and there's also a wealth of information from previous years. This is a great place to look for very specific writing questions. Maybe you wish that you could take an academic writing course. Now you can. It's all online, all for free on our YouTube channel. And relatedly, if you prefer audio content over video content, you can check out NMBU Writing Center's podcast. It's going to be All Right. That's spelled W-R-I-T-E. This is where we talk about some of those other writing-related concepts that can help you as you're writing. Again, if you're a person that likes to listen to things, maybe while you're cooking or doing things around the house, this can be a really great resource for you. Finally, I strongly encourage you to follow all of our social medias. You can find us on Facebook at NMBU Skriva Centre /Writing Center. You can also follow us on Instagram at NMBU Skriva Centre. This is where we're going to post events, writing tips, things you can check out to make sure that you're getting all the help you need in your academic writing journey. With that, let's talk a little bit about effective time management. This is one of those introductory level things that the quicker you start to think about, the easier and better your writing process is going to be. So what I'm showing here is a graphic we use often at the Writing Center. This is our writing process, okay? We start out with a broad concept, a broad idea, and we want to slowly refine that down into our point. Our finished product, something that is submission ready. And the way we do that is through a series of drafts. I refer to this as the revision cycle. In our wonderful triangle chart here, we talk about each of those drafts. But for the sake of video content, I've also written them all out here so that we can go through them together. Our first part of the writing process, and the part that we're going to talk about today in this video, is the note-taking and outlining section of the revision process, or the drafting process, I guess. This is where we're going to talk about planning, note-taking, and outlining. And that's all I'm going to say for now because I have a whole lot to say about it later in this video. After we begin the planning process, we move into the first draft. Sometimes we refer to this as our SFD, or shitty first draft. The reason we do this is because during this phase, We ask that you write as much as you possibly can of your paper. And it's okay if it's bad. This is because it's so much easier to take a messy document and turn it into a good document than it is to take a blank page and turn it into a good document. Our first draft is crucial, and we'll talk about first draft strategies later. After our first draft is finished, we get to move through the rest of our draft phases. I've got third, fourth, fifth here. You can have as many draft revision phases as you need. These are just our suggested guidelines. So, for example, in that second draft, you're most often going to look at structural concerns. Are my ideas in the correct sections for the type of writing I'm doing? Do they flow well? Am I using transitions? This is where you will also focus on SEEK structure. That's basic paragraph structure. SEEK stands for state your claim, explain, evidence, and conclude and transition. This is just how we think about writing paragraphs in a way that is clear, well supported, well analyzed, and moves throughout the document in a way that achieves flow. In our third draft, we recommend focusing on becoming concise. This is where we look at removing prepositions, vague pronouns, interruptions, anything that could make our reading less clear for the reader. Then in that fourth draft, we're looking at maintaining specificity. Are you referring specifically to something? Take the guesswork out of reading for your reader and make sure that you are eliminating redundant words or phrasing that may not be helpful, etc., etc. And finally, that fifth plus draft, any drafts you do after this, is where you're looking for those fine submission level detail editings. This is grammar. This is spelling. This is font size. This is your cover page. Whatever you need to do to make sure this is ready to be off your agenda and turned in, that is your fifth plus level draft, or so we suggest. With the writing process in mind, we can talk about goal setting. The reason we do this, again, is related to that concept of independent accountability, right? And what we want to do is make a physical calendar. We want to set actual goals with actual dates for when we plan to achieve our different drafts of this paper, because a final product will never be the first version of a text that you write. So while you're setting up your calendar, the very first date that should end up on it is, of course, our due date. That's because this is the one we can't move. The due date is the day that it has to be finished. Write it down and circle it or highlight it or whatever you need to do. Make sure it's visible and make sure you're being accountable to it. After that, try to make proposed deadlines that you're keeping for yourself. Remember, you're your own boss for each of those drafts. I might write down, I want to have my first draft completed in the next month and a half maybe. We'll talk a little bit about buffer time in a minute. Set all of those draft goals down on your calendar with a date. And if you are the person that this might be helpful for, I know that I am, this is also a great place where you can schedule accountability meetings. That's a time where you can meet with your advisor, either an academic advisor or one of our writing advisors, to talk about each of those goals you set yourself. So I said I would write my first draft in a month and a half. Did I? Yes, I did, and here's what I got. Or no, I didn't. Here's how far I got. Here's where I need to go. Can you help me? Right? Putting those into a calendar not only helps you to create that accountability with yourself, but if you choose to set up meetings, it also can help you create accountability with someone else. And we all need a little bit of help sometimes. This is just a sample goal setting timeline that I show with people. I made this one on Google Docs. You can do yours on a wall calendar, in your phone, with an app, in a planner. It doesn't matter. But what I want to show you here is that I have dates. These are fake dates because this is a fake calendar. I have my goal. So my first goal is I want to complete my outline and organize notes. And then I ask myself, did I achieve this goal? I can put that down. And then I have a notes section. So if I wanted to, I could say I attended a PhD webinar. That really helped. Or I could say I got sick during this period. I needed to give myself another week. Totally fine. This is just one strategy to help you make sure that you are creating a system that you can stick to, and also that you could show someone if you needed to ask for help. Now, the big question that we often get is, what if I fall behind? Of course, life happens, right? So we want to think about two different things when we think about the what ifs. The first is that you should plan to prevent. The best strategy to keep yourself from getting into trouble is to give yourself extra cushion. So you'll notice when I was talking out loud a minute ago, I said that I would do my first draft in a month, and then I said, a month and a half. The reason we want to think about drafts this way is so that we're giving ourselves tons of cushion, as much cushion as we can allow, in case I'm in the middle of writing my third draft and I get sick. Or maybe I've contacted someone about my research and they can't meet with me during that time anymore. I want to incorporate those what-if moments into my calendar so that I'm not getting near that date that I circled and highlighted, that due date, and finding myself in trouble. Now, if you do find yourself in trouble anyway, this is a point where you can consider scheduling a meeting with an advisor, either your academic advisor, a writing advisor, a trusted friend, your mom maybe, whoever's most helpful, and talk about adjusting your goals. So maybe you wanted to have a perfect, polished, finished product that you were so proud of, and life happened for you. That might mean that your new goal is to create something that is submission ready, but maybe still has room for improvement, and that is completely okay. All right, I'm done talking about this part of our webinar today. I want to move us into planning, note-taking, and outlining. This is by far my favorite thing to talk about in the Writing Center, and that is because it is so important. If you take strong notes, if you have a good outline, if you have an identified plan, almost always you will have a strong text. This is the work we do to make sure that throughout the writing phase, throughout all of those revision cycle processes, we are creating something that makes sense, that is clear, that is well supported, and that is going to the destination we said we would go to, right? So I like to say that good writing begins with good preparation. I categorize preparation into these three categories. Our first is planning, so creating the goal for our text. Our second is note-taking, which is learning to read specifically for writing. And our third is outlining. What plan can we make to achieve that goal that we set? Okay, let's talk really quickly about planning. This is a concept I use at all levels. I have used it in the secondary level with my teenage students. I use it at the PhD level in my one-on-one consultations and in these PhD webinars. And that is that your thesis statement or your hypothesis or your research question or the focus of your academic text should have these two concepts. You should have a big idea, and this is the overall point of your argument, and then you should have key points. These support your big idea, and they answer the question why. So our big idea, academic writing most often requires a response to a question. The thesis or your hypothesis or the point that you're making for this text should answer the question and summarize the supports for the answer. For example, let's say that I am writing a text and I have the question, which music streaming platform is better, Spotify or Apple Music? And in my personal opinion, my big idea would be Spotify is better than Apple Music. This is answering the question that I was asked. And now I'm ready to provide those supports or those key points. All right, a big idea without supports is just an opinion. That's not what we want in academic writing. We want to build a well-supported argument. So our key points will answer the question why. I've just said to you, Spotify is better than Apple Music. You should ask me, why? Great question. I have 3 key points to answer that. So Spotify is better than Apple Music because 1, 2, 3. 1, because its algorithms are better. That's my first key point. 2, it makes it easier to interact and connect with friends. Second key point. 3, its end of the year features are more enjoyable. Boom. So I have now created a big idea and I've created key points. This is going to help me keep my text on track. It is going to make sure that I have an established and clear goal. And when I move on, it's going to help me make sure that I am taking effective, useful notes. It's also going to lay the foundation for my outline, make sure that I'm putting things in the places that I intend to, that things are corresponding to those key points, right? And it's going to help me maintain a clear purpose throughout the writing process. That's the basics of our planning phase. Next, I want to talk to you about note-taking. Note-taking is where I see students lose a lot of time. So let's say you're doing your due diligence and you're reading for your course, you're reading for your study, that's excellent. If you are not taking notes during this process, you are ultimately going to have to read everything twice, which is a terrible use of your time, right? So what we want to do is we want to build habits to make the most of your time and to be able to later refer back to the things that you read that were helpful. The way that we do this is that we read with purpose. That's why we first have a plan. We have that big idea with key points. We know what we're looking for as we're reading. I'm looking for things that support my argument in this way. The second reason we're trying to build these habits is so that we can write down what's important and refer back to it all later. I've got 2 strategies to talk to you about today that help you to do this. The first one you're probably familiar with. It's an annotated bibliography. This might be something that you've been assigned in a class before, but essentially what an annotated bibliography does is it organizes multiple sources. It includes the full citation, it summarizes the work, and then it creates a written notes section on how you intend to use this source later. So here in our example, we have our citations. These are also done by category. Excellent annotated bibliography strategy. So you can see our category 1, climate change effects, category 2 down here. Then we include the source. Most annotated bibliographies will ask you to do the full citation there, just so that you can copy and paste it in later. We're going to summarize that text, and then we're going to make notes of, I plan to use this text to support X point in this way, boom, boom, boom. This is a great way to refer back to your notes. Check what sources you read, what they helped you understand, and where in your paper you can use them. My favorite strategy is one that I used in my graduate school with a professor, and one that I'm so happy to share with you. You can scan this QR code, or I will also post a link to this version. You can make a copy of it. It's in Google Doc. You'll just go to File, make a copy, and then it's yours to edit. This is a critical reading log. I like the critical reading log because I think it's excellent visually to help you organize and sort information. It's a good way to write down all of the information that you actually need while not necessarily wasting a ton of time creating full citations, because what if ultimately you don't use this source, whatever. What you're seeing here is in that first column, I wrote down my author and my text. This is by this person in this article. My second column, if it is a physical text or if it's a PDF, I write down my page number. I found this information here. My third column is where I can put either a quote, if what I'm referencing is short enough, or a summary. So if I'm referencing a longer text or a longer excerpt or a concept or a whole chapter, I'm just going to summarize it here. But if it's short enough, I'll plug in the quote. My next column here says code. The reason we do code is because you can sort your notes into categories, and later you can Command F this document. You can search this document for, my code here is understanding literacy, right? So I can find all of my notes that I think fall under the category of understanding literacy, and I can access them really quickly, really effectively. I love this system. And my final category, similarly to our annotated bibliography, is just for my personal notes. I want to make sure that I'm not just regurgitating information that already exists, but I am building upon it. This source shows that X. I plan to use it via Y. Create something, add to the conversation, build on top of the existing literature. Those are our 2 note strategies. Now I'm briefly going to introduce you to outlining. I'm not going to give you too many specifics here because everyone ultimately creates their own outlining strategy that helps them best. However, if you do come to our live webinar, this is something that we will be practicing, and you can experiment around with a few outlining techniques and see what works best for you. With that said, you've established a goal. You've created a system for taking notes, and now you should create an outline. So often I get students who think this is a step that they can skip, and it results in catastrophe. That is because if you do a good outline, your paper, I like to say, writes itself. So my outline, I would write down introduction, and then I would write down bullet points. I'm going to write this. I'm going to write this. I'm going to include this. My last statement is this. When I'm ready to write that introduction, all I have to do is kind of puzzle piece this information that I already laid out together, and it's more or less done. This is taking a lot of the thinking out of writing. It's going to prevent that dreaded blinking cursor on the blank document that happens, because you have a plan. You know what you're going to do. Your outline can be super specific, it can be super vague, but what you want to do is establish goals for each section and be able to visualize your final document. So how are these ideas connecting? How am I transitioning? Where can I establish flow? If you have a strong outline, it is very likely that you will have a significantly easier time writing your paper. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk about, and you're going to hear me read a lot from these slides, is our what goes where. So with academic writing, we are looking at very specific structure. We have lots of possible sections. Maybe you need an abstract. Maybe you need a case description. Maybe you need a literature review. Maybe you need a limitation section. There's a lot of things that can go into an academic text. Typically, we see two common academic writing structures. That is the IMRaD structure, which stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion/Conclusion. Or we see the ILMaD structure, which stands for Introduction, Literature Review, and Background. So that's just an added section in there. Methods, and then Discussion, Conclusion. Most often, these sections will be included in your academic text at this phase. I'm going to walk you through all of these sections. I'm going to just read from my slides here what they all are, because I want you to have this information. And then you will be hopefully able to review these sections and decide what makes the most sense for the type of research you're doing. If you're not sure, this is a great point to ask your academic advisor on and see, do I need a literature review? Should my methods section include something else? Excellent. Have a concept of what those sections are, though. First, we're looking at an introduction. So the introduction of your paper should provide background information on the research topic. You want to create context. It should state the research question and its significance. That's a really important part. Summarize the current state of knowledge on the topic, outline the objectives and goals of the study, and provide a roadmap for the rest of the paper, including research methodology, findings, and conclusions. So tell your readers in the introduction section, in this paper, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. We're avoiding surprises. We're laying it all out ahead of time. It should be clear, concise, engaging, and it should establish the relevance and importance of the research being reported. Our next section does not happen in every paper, but it is the literature review and background. So this is where you're going to provide an overview of existing research related to the topic of the thesis. This is critical evaluation of the previous studies, their methods, findings, and limitations, and their relevance to your current study. This can include theoretical frameworks and backgrounds or pre-existing research, and should introduce readers to what they need to know in order to best understand your research. I most often tell people that if there is existing studies, research, concepts, frameworks that your readers must understand in order to understand your research, you probably need a literature review. Our next section is methods. Methods is like the Pinterest recipe of your academic writing text. So someone should be able to use your methods section to perfectly replicate your study. That means you're describing the research design. If it's relevant, you're going to talk about your participants, and this is where you can talk about consent and privacy and some of those ethics concerns. This is where you'll present specific data collection procedures and discuss data analysis. You want to be transparent, you want to be accurate, you want to talk about what you did specifically. If there's something you would have changed, that does not go in the methods section. Here is just for talking about what you actually did as you actually did it, so that someone else could, in theory, do exactly what you did and hopefully produce similar results. Next, we have the results section, which is where you present the findings. It should focus on key results, and this is where you're going to see statistics, tables, figures, and interpretations. You want this easy, clear to read, organized, and super readable. Finally, you want your discussion and conclusion. This is where you provide a comprehensive interpretation of the study results and their implications. So we interpret the study. We talk about those relevant comparisons to previous research in the literature review, if you did a literature review. This is where you talk about implications. This shows that we might be interested in looking at XYZ. This is also where you talk about limitations. So I would have done this differently, however, or the research was affected by. Something, for example, that could come up in limitations for you is I was going to interview these participants in person. However, due to a weather event, lack of funding, whatever, we had to conduct these interviews via Zoom. Because of this, the research could have been affected in this way. That's a limitation. And finally, you're going to present those recommendations. What do you think should happen now that you've researched and proved what you proved? Don't forget to conclude your paper in this section. So make sure you're taking that point and reintroducing it back into the broader concept of your subject. All right, that was a lot of information. Thanks for sticking with me. A quick summary of what we've talked about today is first, we talked about time management, understanding writing as a process. And then we talked about effective planning. Once again, don't skip the planning phase. Make sure you're setting goals, writing down your due date, and setting up times that you want to check in with yourself to make sure that your progress is still progressing, right? Then we talked about what goes where. That's the long-winded part I just read to you, but familiarize yourself. In a methods section, you're looking for XYZ. In a literature review section, you're looking for this, that, and the other. And if you come to our live PhD webinar, we're going to have some interactive activities and specialized assistance. If you're viewing this in time, we hope to see you there. And if you're viewing this after our PhD webinar has occurred, we hope to provide you with some of those resources asynchronously. That's all from me for now. Thank you for tuning in with me today, and as always, happy writing.